This is Full Throttle, the Presidio Group's automotive industry podcast. I'm your host, Jason Stein, Presidio's managing director, and also host of SiriusXM's Cars and Culture on Business Channel 132. On a monthly basis, Full Throttle serves as the industry's meeting point for great conversations with leaders across the automotive world.
Now more than ever, I think peer collaboration is more important as we face the challenges of the industry, as we begin to renormalize back into a traditional retail environment. Like in your personal life, when you might have the need for better intelligence or information, et cetera, you surround your people with trusted advisors. You surround yourself with trusted advisors. And that's essentially what 20 Group members do, is they surround themselves with trusted advisors who are willing to share their data so you can have an intelligent conversation around what truly is possible and work on each other's businesses within a very secure and confidential environment.
This automotive business is all about data points. Data drives the retail world and allows savvy dealers the chance to drive change, identify change, and chart a course for a more profitable future. And no one collects, interprets, and shares more data in the retail world than NCM Associates. Of course, they've been doing it for decades, all the way back to the original 20 Group meetings that the industry first formed, allowing some of the first car dealers in America to gather and share best practices, which in turn allowed them to make their businesses more efficient. Of course, they also collected data. Today, that tradition carries on, but with an even more methodical approach. Now, not just the Ford dealers who are new to the business, but all businesses that want to participate in the learnings of others. Paul Faletti sits at the core of those gatherings, working with his NCM partners to make the retail channel a more transparent and educational space. NCM Associates is a 100% employee-owned company, serving thousands of new and pre-owned automotive dealers, OEMs, and business operators in more than 20 other industries throughout North America. Since its founding in 1947, it's worked to create solutions and hone best practices to help its clients be more profitable and nimble when times are good. It also prepares them for challenging economic conditions. It now consists of 20 groups, training, consultants, software, and travel solutions. Paul is NCM's president and CEO. Today, he discusses the trends and data points NCM is observing in this ever-changing world and points us in the right direction on what's next. The NCM and data story today on Full Throttle.
Hi, this is Paul Faletti, and this is Presidio's Full Throttle podcast.
There's probably nobody at the epicenter of the car retail universe more equipped to talk about what's going on in terms of trends, simply because of all the people who he knows and all the people who he talks to. But we're very fortunate to have him talk to us today. Paul, welcome to the program. Welcome to Full Throttle.
Thanks, Jason. Pleasure to be with you. Appreciate it.
You're always on Full Throttle because you're always somewhere and you're always talking to dealers and you're always on top of some of the latest issues. Let's start off, for those who don't know and who couldn't know, tell me a little bit about NCM and what you guys are hearing and seeing on a regular basis, Paul.
Sure. Well, thank you for the kind words. We are blessed to have an amazing team that has the opportunity to work with an amazing group of dealers on a daily basis. And to your point, that gives us a really privileged access to intelligence that I'm happy to talk with you about today. So NCM got its start back in the 1940s. We were founded by a Ford dealer based out of Kansas City, Missouri, where our headquarters remains today, who really was a pioneer in the consolidation space. When he exited the business a couple decades later, he had a couple dozen dealerships, which was pretty unheard of at the time. And Jason, as he began to scale his business, he saw the complexities of comparative analytics, or lack thereof. He really wanted to get his arms around understanding what was the rationale or the reason behind disparate performance amongst his own stores. And he eventually started a company that later on would become NCM Associates, or for those of you who've been in the industry a little bit longer, Nichols Campbell Morrow. And he required that his own dealerships report on a standard format into that organization. And the job of the company at the time was to analyze, aggregate, benchmark, and normalize that data and provide a composite back to Mr. Fick, our founder, whereby he could have an intellectual discussion based on fair metrics with his general managers. And over time, they began to open up that discipline to other non-competing dealers. And that resulted in really where we got our start, which was in 1947, the formation of the first automotive 20 group, Ford Group. And I'm happy to say that we have the great responsibility and real pleasure of moderating that 20 group still today, 76 years later, with some fourth generational dealers in there and some outstanding, well-known names within the Ford community. And that's where we got our start.
And the purpose today is to continue much of that sharing and to spread the insights that the group and the data bring together, correct?
It is. I mean, I selfishly have a skewed perspective that I see it as a great thing for the industry. It's dealers helping make other dealers better, and rising the performance of the group as a whole would be the ultimate objective. And now more than ever, I think peer collaboration is more important as we face the challenges of the industry, as we begin to renormalize back into a traditional retail environment. Like in your personal life, when you might have the need for better intelligence or information, et cetera, you surround your people with trusted advisors. You surround yourself with trusted advisors. And that's essentially what 20 group members do, is they surround themselves with trusted advisors who are willing to share their data so you can have an intelligent conversation around what truly is possible and work on each other's businesses within a very secure and confidential environment.
How in the world did you do this during COVID? Zoom 20 groups?
It was amazing. And I would have bet that this would have been the case, and it was. Like everybody else, we pivoted towards a remote digital Zoom environment best we could. But as quick as those dealers could come back together and meet in person, they did so. These 20 groups are usually planned 2-3 years out, so pivoting locations is not always easy. But I can tell you that those dealers found a way to find the environments, whether it was city, state, et cetera, where they could most quickly get back together and meet in person. They really felt that need to get back together in person and meet as soon as possible. And really, that's gone back to what it was pre-COVID at this point. We have some digital check-ins. There might be an opportunity to have a Zoom call in between meetings, but these dealers, these ladies and gentlemen, they want to see each other. They want to be with each other, both inside and outside the meeting room in person.
So with this industry being as topsy-turvy as it's been over the last 3 years, what were some of the biggest insights you pulled out of, say, 2021 and 22?
Well, it was aberrational, to say the least. I will say, as a starting point, one of our recommendations, so you can understand some of those new trends and tendencies, is you really need to go back and start taking a look at your numbers from 2019 as a baseline. There's some good intelligence over the COVID years that we have in the data now. But as things go back to normal, you need to understand the baseline that you left and went into COVID with, what happened during COVID, and begin to prepare for scaling your business off of a more traditional retail environment that we're starting to see come back into play. And a lot of that discussion, Jason, is it's not that we want to forget or ignore what happened during COVID. There were some processes and procedures that were greatly accelerated that the industry needed, as we know, whether it's remote pickup, whether it's just easier ways of interacting with the dealership. But in a lot of ways, too, you've got to go back to the basics. There was a lot of process evaporation that occurred during COVID, whether it wasn't quite as necessary as it was prior due to a shortage of inventory. We had a lot of people join the industry during COVID. They never really were truly formally trained on those processes, as well as be held accountable to them. I'll give you a perfect example that happened to me this week very briefly. I went to schedule my own vehicle for service. I went online to the dealership that I use and trust, and noticed that the scheduler had no appointments for months, 0 appointments with any service advisor, any day, et cetera. Now, we all seen that in many cases. Some of these shops are backed up a couple of weeks, which is a problem in of itself. But I knew that if it was months, there was probably a tech issue here. So I engaged the chat function on the website and was told, whether that was a real person or a bot or something in between, that I would have to call the dealership. Okay, I called the dealership. I went through the menu, to schedule service, sat on hold for 8 minutes, eventually chose the voicemail function, left a voicemail, waited a full 24 hours, never heard from the dealership, got in my car, drove to the dealership, and ended up talking to the receptionist, who was wonderful, who got somebody on the phone for me to schedule a service appointment. But she literally handed me the phone of the reception's desk to schedule my service appointment. And all I could think of throughout that entire chain of processes, how many missed opportunities there were. And literally, I'm tying up the main line of the dealership to schedule one single service appointment. Now, that's a sample size of one. We know there are thousands of victories every day where people are taken incredibly well taken care of. But the reality is that that's not an unusual situation. And I think in a lot of ways, we took our eye off the ball, and we're not noticing those type of things because we're not going back to the basics to make sure that everything is working as it should.
Going back to the basics is probably thematically one of the number one principles that arise out of the meetings that you organize. What else are you hearing these days, Paul, now that we're firmly into 2023 and hopefully firmly with COVID in the rearview mirror?
You know, one of the really encouraging signs that we're seeing is the investment dealers are making in training. And this hasn't been new. This really took off during COVID, but I really feel like dealers are now willing to invest in the team that is going to take them into the future with them, whether they're looking to scale, whether they're looking to exit, et cetera. They want to have the best people, and they want to make sure those people are best equipped. And that's stating the obvious, but it's the right and fair thing to do, to make sure if you're going to hold people accountable to a higher standard going forward, that they're equipped to do so. And no surprise, Jason, as you know, grosses begin to come out of the stratospheric level that they were on the front end side, the variable side of the business, more attention is being paid to fixed operations once again. And we see that in our training. Fixed operations training is growing at the fastest pace right now. But I think what's really great is the focus on leadership. 11 years ago, we started our General Manager's Executive Program, and that is an 11-month program that dealers typically spend, or managers typically spend 5 weeks in a classroom. Everything else is outside the classroom. But it's an intense, significant investment in a GM or future GM. And for a couple of years, we held about one class a year. And we limit those to about 22, 23 people. This year, we'll have 18. 7 that carried over from last year because they're still in that 11-month cycle. And we're starting 11 new ones. And by the way, the first dedicated Canada GMEP program is launching this year and is already sold out. I think that's a tremendously positive sign for the business going forward, that we're taking this very seriously. We know we're going to have to change, but we're going to have leaders who help us manage disruption or manage the new environment that we're starting to face. I think it's a great, great sign of what's to come for the business and the industry.
We've talked on this program before about some of the technological changes that are occurring. One of them being, of course, related to your own experience, but automated intelligence, AI, ChatGPT. Before we get into some of the other technological changes, is that at the forefront of the conversations that you're hearing? And if so, what's being said?
It is. I mean, it's hard to escape. It's in the headlines, as you can relate to. So it comes into the meeting room. I think that progressive dealers are embracing technological change. They're not looking at it as a fear factor. I still think there's quite a bit of debate and work to be done on just how impactful it is to the business. But there are some really good lessons to be learned. I think ChatGPT in particular has the potential to drive efficiencies. I think it's a little, let's say it's not quite showtime ready at this point, but it's generating some conversations around what is the most productive use of my human capital, and where can technology, whether it's GPT, whether it's AI, whether it's software processes, et cetera, where can I deploy that to make my operations more efficient and best utilize that human capital experience that we just talked about dealers are investing significant dollars into.
Since you're involved in so much training and relatively a good amount of conversation around training, tell me about the labor issues that some of your dealers are trying to handle right now. Obviously, they are managing for the future, but it's difficult to do that when the workforce might not be as plentiful as you'd like.
It's tough. I mean, we're all keenly aware of the struggle to find and scale the technician side of the business. But what one could argue that good people, regardless of the area of the business, are hard to find, at times even harder to keep. So I will commend the clients that we've had the fortunate interactions with, that they've pivoted where they needed to, whether that's addressing pay plans, whether that's addressing benefits, whether that's addressing job descriptions and responsibilities. I think that you can see that with more and more operators who are focusing on scaling the business. They're not letting human resources be left alone for the ride. More and more operations are beginning to go down the formal road of having a true human resources operation, where maybe that was historically something that fell on one person's desk and they were responsible for all the compliance issues, which typically came first and foremost, and maybe some of the employee development training and true career development took a back seat. And so I'm seeing some encouraging things and trying to pivot to the market and address what people want to have in a career in automotive. We got a long ways to go, needless to say, and it is going to be a bit easier for the larger operators to be able to invest in some of those resources, but it is happening. It's good to see.
So much of what you collect is around data. You mentioned that at the opening. You've got data 6 ways to Sunday, as they say. What do you analyze, and what can you discern from that data that you have?
Well, we are now, over the years, now that we work with over 20 industries, we have the benefit of being able to compare what's happening across industries. Just to give you an example, right now, the sentiment overall within automotive is still quite good. I think when looking at some of the forecasted SAR numbers today, inventory numbers, et cetera, times are still pretty good. But if you look at some of the other industries we serve, like recreational vehicles, they're really feeling the impact. On average, down 40%. So you have some of these discretionary industries that may be a leading indicator of what could come from automotive. So on our side, we feel it's our responsibility, and we began to publish and open up reports across industries to allow for some of our clients to see what's happening within other industries that they need to prepare for now, either as a leader or laggard index. The other element on the data side that I think is extremely exciting is addressing some of the challenges that even our organization hasn't been able to do internally. One of the hot topics within 20 group discussions right now is digital advertising spend. Am I getting the right return for that digital advertising spend, as we now know we need to start advertising once again as inventory comes back? And we had an opportunity to partner with an outside organization, Foundation Direct, to give our clients within 20 groups a digital performance composite to show each of them how their digital advertising spend is performing versus each other. And that's a really, really powerful new data set that NCM, just from a capability point of view, doesn't have in-house. So we're looking for ways to make sure that our clients are getting the intelligence they need to have that discussion in the meeting room, whether it comes from us or we have to partner up with somebody to do it. And I think we see that across the industry. People have to have great partners out there. They can't do it all themselves.
And your data also indicates, as you just alluded to, that as much as there's conversation about a relative slowdown or demise or softening, things are still pretty strong, right, Paul?
If you look historically back, go back to the 18-19 period, where we thought things were pretty good at that point in time already. Maybe some storm clouds on the horizon, but overall historically quite good. Things remain quite good, without talking about franchises specifically. Year to date through May, pre-tax owner's profit removed, owner's pay removed, every single franchise that we tracked was profitable except for one. That statistically is a pretty good result.
Amazing. And your prediction for the back half of the year, what are you looking for as we go into Q3?
I think it's going to still be quite a positive finish to the year. I still think that there's enough momentum, and there still will be certain inventory constraints that the opportunity is there. I think that progressive dealers, will continue to focus on the used car business and the service business as well, managing the inventory that's out there. I think one of the greatest headwinds, which we all know about, is affordability, whether it's affordability on the EV side or just what's happening with interest rates in general. It looks like we've gone back to kind of pre-COVID delinquencies as a group, but I still think there's enough momentum that it's going to be a strong second half of the year. Final question.
You're sitting with a Porsche Targa behind you on the wall. You're a car guy, Paul?
I'm a car guy. It's why I got in the car business. And those who know me know that I have great respect for the Porsche brand, and that came out of a promise when I was a 6-year-old for my aunt that when I turned 16, I would be the recipient of her 911. And Jason, I can tell you 40 something years later, she still has that car and I don't.
Well, maybe we'll have her on the show next.
That's right. It's just a great industry. It's just made up of so many wonderful people, very, very intelligent operators, serial entrepreneurs. It's just, I don't have to go on and on other than to say that it's a passion, it's a thrill, it's an honor to be associated with it.
Well, it's an honor to have you on the program. And Paul, I really appreciate you sharing your insights, NCM's insights, with our Full Throttle audience today.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks again to my guest, Paul Faletti, President and CEO of NCM Associates. And thanks for listening to Full Throttle. Come back to us later in the month for our next interview on this platform. Suggestions? Email me at jstein@thepresidiogroup.com. And to learn more about the Presidio Group, go to thepresidiogroup.com or follow us on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening.